Welcome everyone. This is Autumn Rain 13 and this is a live stream. I hope you're doing well today. I hope that's not too loud. Let me go ahead and double check. Looks fine. Alright. So, tonight I'm taking a break from gaming and I'm going to read a little bit. I got a big old book of HP Lovecraft. Actually, let me go ahead and pull that up. There we go. So yeah, come and relax with me. Take a sit down. Let me know if the volume's a little too low on my voice or a little too high on the music. But yeah, time for some haunts and some creeps and all that kind of stuff. So tonight, I gotta, seriously, this is the whole collection of HP Lovecraft stories. So I think I might read 3 for tonight. And the first I really wanted to read was The Alchemist. I'm actually not sure what it's entirely about. But I've heard stories. So if you give me one moment, I gotta get my water out. Alrighty. But yeah, a little story time. Let's do it. Alright. The Alchemist by HP Lovecraft. High up, crowning the grassy summit of a swelling mound whose sides are wooded near the base with the gnarled trees of the primeval forest, stands the old chateau of my ancestors. For centuries, its lofty battlements have frowned down upon the wild and rugged countryside about, serving as a home and stronghold for the proud house whose honored line is older than even the moss-grown castle walls. These ancient turrets, stained by the storms of generations and crumbling under the slow yet mighty pressure of time, formed in the ages of feudalism one of the most dreaded and formidable fortresses in all of France. From its machicolated parapets and mounted battlements, barons, counts, and even kings had been defied, yet never had its spacious halls resounded to the footsteps of the invader. But since those glorious years, all is changed. A poverty but little above the level of dire want, together with a pride of name that forbids its alleviation by the pursuits of commercial life, have prevented the scions of our line from maintaining their estates in pristine splendor, and the falling stones of the walls, the overgrown vegetation in the parks, the dry and dusty moat, the ill-paved courtyards, and toppling towers without, as well as the sagging floors, the worm-eaten wainscots, and the faded tapestries within, all tell a gloomy tale of fallen grandeur. As the ages passed, first one, then another of the 4 great turrets were left to ruin, until at last but a single tower housed the sadly reduced descendants of the... Sorry, I just realized that. Holy cow! Leave me alone, universities. Okay, sorry about that. As the ages passed, first one, then another of the 4 great turrets were left to ruin, until at last but a single tower housed the sadly reduced descendants of the once mighty lords of the estate. It was in one of the vast and gloomy chambers of this remaining tower that I, Antoine, last of the unhappy and accursed Comte Stick, first saw the light of day 90 long years ago. Within these walls and amongst the dark and shadowy forests, the wild ravines and grottos of the hillside below, were spent the first years of my troubled life. My parents I never knew. My father had been killed at the age of 32, a month before I was born, by the fall of a stone somehow dislodged from one of the deserted parapets of the castle. And my mother having died at my birth, my care and education devolved solely upon one remaining servitor, an old and trusted man of considerable intelligence, whose name I remember as Pierre. I was an only child, and the lack of companionship which this fact entailed upon me was augmented by the strange care exercised by my aged guardian in excluding me from the society of peasant children whose abodes were scattered here and there upon the plains that surround the base of the hill. At the same time, Pierre said that this restriction was imposed upon me because my noble birth placed me above association with such plebeian company. Now I know that its real object was to keep from my ears the idle tales of the dreaded curse upon our line, that were nightly told and magnified by the simple tenantry as they conversed in hushed accents in the glow of their cottage hearths. Thus isolated and thrown upon my own resources, I spent the hours of my childhood in poring over the ancient tomes that filled the shadow-haunted library of the chateau, and in roaming without aim or purpose through the perpetual dusk of the spectral wood that clothes the side of the hill near its foot. It was perhaps an effect of such surroundings that my mind early acquired a shade of melancholy. Those studies and pursuits which partake of the dark and occult in nature most strongly claimed my attention. Of my own race, I was permitted to learn singularly little, yet what small knowledge of it I was able to gain seemed to depress me much. Perhaps it was at first only the manifest reluctance of my old preceptor to discuss with me my paternal ancestry that gave rise to the terror which I have ever felt at the mention of my great house. Yet as I grew out of childhood, I was able to piece together disconnected fragments of this discourse, let slip from the unwilling tongue which had begun to falter in approaching senility, that had a sort of relation to a certain circumstance which I had always deemed strange, but which now became dimly terrible. The circumstances to which I allude is the early age at which all the contents of my life had met their end. Whilst I had hitherto considered this but a natural attribute of a family of short-lived men, I afterward pondered long upon these premature deaths, and began to connect them with the wanderings of the old man, who often spoke of a curse which for centuries had prevented the lives of the holders of my title from much exceeding the span of 32 years. Upon my 21st birthday, the aged Pierre gave to me a family document which he had said for many generations had been handed down from father to son, and continued by each possessor. Its contents were of the most startling nature, and its perusal confirmed the gravest of my apprehensions. At this time, my belief in the supernatural was firm and deep-seated, else I should have dismissed with scorn this incredible narrative unfolded before my eyes. The paper carried me back to the days of the 13th century. Oh, what's up, little Ricky? Hey. Doing a little reading. Hope you enjoy. It told of a certain ancient man who had once dwelt on our estates, a person of no small accomplishments, though little above the rank of peasant. By name, Michel, usually designated by the surname Mauvais, the evil, on account of his sinister reputation. Oh no, I hope you get to study, some time to study, little Ricky. That's a lot of tests. Good luck. You want me to read your book to you? I'm kidding, but if you do, let me know. I'll read it. He had studied beyond the custom of his kind, seeking such things as the Philosopher's Stone, or the elixir of eternal life, and was reputed wise in the terrible secrets of black magic and alchemy. Michel Mauvais had one son, named Charles, a youth as proficient as himself in the hidden arts, and who therefore had been called Le Sorcier, or the Wizard. This pair, shunned by all honest folk, were suspected of the most hideous practices. Old Michel was said to have burnt his wife alive as a sacrifice to the devil, and the unaccountable disappearances of many small peasant children were laid at the dreaded door of these two. Yet through the dark natures of the father and the son ran one redeeming ray of humanity. The evil old man loved his offspring with fierce intensity, whilst the youth had for his parent a more than filial affection. One night, the castle on the hill was thrown into the wildest confusion by the vanishment of young Godfrey, son to Henri the Comte. A searching party, headed by the frantic father, invaded the cottage of sorcerers, and there came upon old Michel Mauvais, busy over a huge and violently boiling cauldron. Without certain cause, in the ungoverned madness of fury and despair, the Comte laid hands on the aged wizard, and ere he released his murderous hold on his victim was no more. Meanwhile, joyful servants were proclaiming the finding of a young Godfrey in a distant and unused chamber of the great edifice, telling too late that poor Michel had been killed in vain. As the Comte and his associates turned away from the lowly abode of the Alchemist, the form of Charles Le Sorcier appeared through the trees. The excited chatter of the menials standing about told him what had occurred, yet he seemed at first unmoved at his father's fate. Then, slowly advancing to meet the Comte, he pronounced in dull yet terrible accents the curse that ever afterward haunted the house of May never a noble of thy murderous line survive to reach a greater age than thine, spake he, when suddenly leaping backwards into the black wood, he drew from his tunic a phial of colorless liquid, which he threw into the face of his father's slayer as he disappeared behind the inky curtain of the night. The Comte died without utterance, and was buried the next day, but little more than 32 years from the hour of his birth. No trace of the assassin could be found, though relentless bands of peasants scoured the neighboring woods and the meadowland around the hill. Thus time and the want of a reminder dulled the memory of the curse in the minds of the late Comte's family, so that when Godfrey, innocent cause of the whole tragedy and now bearing the title, was killed by an arrow whilst hunting, at the age of 32, there were no thoughts save those of grief at his demise. But when years afterwards, the next young Comte, Robert by name, was found dead in a nearby field from no apparent cause, the peasants told in whispers that their seigneur had but lately passed his 32nd birthday when surprised by early death. Louis, son to Robert, was found drowned in the moat at the same fateful age, and thus down through the centuries ran the ominous chronicle. Henri's, Robert's, Antoine's, and Armand's snatched from happy and virtuous lives, when little below the age of their unfortunate ancestor at his murder. That I had left at most but 11 years of further existence was made certain to me by the words which I read. My life, previously held at small value, now became dearer to me each day, as I delved deeper and deeper into the mysteries of the hidden world of black magic. Isolated as I was, modern science had produced no impression upon me, and I labored as in the Middle Ages, as wrapped as had been old Michel and young Charles themselves in the acquisition of demonological and alchemical learning. Yet, read as I might, in no manner could I account for the strange curse upon my line. In unusually rational moments, I would even go so far as to seek natural explanation. attributing the early deaths of my ancestors to the sinister Charles Le Sorcier and his heirs. Yet having found upon careful inquiry that there were no known descendants of the alchemist, I would fall back to occult studies, and once more endeavor to find a spell that would release my house from its terrible burden. Upon one thing I was absolutely resolved. I should never wed, for since no other branches of my family were in existence, I thus end the curse with myself. As I drew near the age of 30, old Pierre was called to the land beyond. Alone I buried him beneath the stones of the courtyard about which he had loved to wander in life. Thus, I was left to ponder on myself as the only human creature within the great fortress, and in my utter solitude my mind began to cease in its vain protests against the impending doom, to become almost reconciled to the fate which so many of my ancestors had met. Much of my time was now occupied in the exploration of the ruined and abandoned halls and towers of the old chateau, which in youth fear had caused me to shun, and some of which old Pierre had once told me had not been trodden by human foot for over 4 centuries. Strange and awesome were many of the objects I encountered. Furniture covered by dust of ages and crumbling with the rot of long dampness met my eyes. Cobwebs in a profusion never before seen by me were spun everywhere, and huge bats flapped their bony and uncanny wings on all sides of the otherwise untenanted gloom. Of my exact age, even down to the days and hours, I kept a most careful record, for each movement of the pendulum of the massive clock in the library told off so much more of my doomed existence. At length, I approached that time which I had long so viewed with apprehension. Since most of my ancestors had been seized some little while before they reached the exact age of the Comte Henri at his end, I was every moment on the watch for the coming of the unknown death. In what strange form the curse should overtake me, I knew not, but I was resolved, at least, that it should not find me a cowardly or passive victim. With new vigor, I applied myself to my examination of the old chateau and its contents. It was upon one of the longest of all my excursions of discovery in the deserted portion of the castle, less than a week before that fatal hour which I must mark the utmost limit of my stay on earth, beyond which I could have not even the slightest hope of continuing to draw breath, that I came upon the culminating event of my whole life. I had spent the better part of the morning in climbing up and down half-ruined staircases in one of the most dilapidated of the ancient turrets. As the afternoon progressed, I sought the lower levels. Story time. Hey, Reverend Turn, what's up? Welcome to the story time. We are reading The Alchemist by HP Lovecraft. So we did a little short story, but it wasn't. Oh, hey, what's up? Hello, I didn't see you there. It's good to see you, David. Good to see ya. Okay, so where am I? As the afternoon progressed, I sought the lower levels, descending into what appeared to be either a medieval place of confinement or a more recently excavated storehouse for gunpowder. As I slowly traversed the nitre-encrusted passageway at the foot of the last staircase, the paving became very damp, and soon I saw by the light of my flickering torch that a blank, water-stained wall impeded my journey. Turning to retrace my steps, my eye fell upon a small trapdoor with a ring, which lay directly beneath my feet. Pausing, I succeeded with difficulty in raising it, whereupon there was revealed a black aperture, exhaling noxious fumes which caused my torch to sputter, and disclosing in the unsteady glare the top of a flight of stone steps. As soon as the torch, which I lowered into the repellent depths, burned freely and steadily, I commenced my descent. The steps were many, and led to a narrow stone-flagged passage, which I knew must be far underground. The passage proved of great length, and terminated in a massive oaken door, dripping with the moisture of the place, and stoutly resisting all my attempts to open it. Ceasing after a time my efforts in this direction, I had proceeded back some distance towards the steps, where there suddenly fell, to my experience, one of the most profound and maddening shocks capable of reception by the human mind. Without warning, I heard the heavy door behind me creak slowly open upon its rusted hinges. My immediate sensations are incapable of analysis. To be confronted in a place as thoroughly deserted as I had deemed the old castle, with evidence of the presence of a man or spirit, produced in my brain a horror of the most acute description. When at last I turned and faced the seat of the sound, my eyes must have started from their orbits at the sight that they beheld. There, in the ancient Gothic doorway, stood a human figure. It was that of a man clad in a skull cap and long medieval tunic of dark color. His long hair and flowing beard were of a terrible and intense black hue, and of incredible profusion. His forehead, high beyond the usual dimensions, his cheeks deep sunken and heavily lined with wrinkles, and his hands, long, claw-like, and gnarled, were of such a deathly, marble-like whiteness as I have never elsewhere seen in a man. His figure, lean to the proportions of a skeleton, was strangely bent, and almost lost within the voluminous folds of his peculiar garment. But strangest of all were his eyes, twin caves of abysmal blackness, profound in expression of understanding, yet inhuman in degree of wickedness. These were now fixed upon me, piercing my soul with their hatred, and rooting me to the spot whereon I stood. At last the figure spoke in a rumbling voice that chilled me through with its dull hollowness and latent malevolence. The language in which the discourse was clothed was that debased form of Latin in use amongst the more learned men of the Middle Ages, and made familiar to me by my prolonged researches into the works of the old alchemists and demonologists. The apparition spoke of the curse which had hovered over my house, told me of my coming end, dwelt on the wrong perpetrated by my ancestor against old Michel Mauvais, and gloated over the revenge of Charles Le Sorcier. He told how the young Charles had escaped into the night, returning in after years to kill Godfrey the heir with an arrow, just as he approached the age which had been his father's at his assassination. How he had secretly returned to the estate and established himself unknown in the even then deserted subterranean chamber whose doorway now framed the hideous narrator. How he had seized Robert, son of Godfrey, in a field, forced poison down his throat, and left him to die at the age of 32, thus maintaining the foul provisions of his vengeful curse. At this point, I was left to imagine the solution of the great mystery of all, how the curse had been fulfilled since that time when Charles Le Sorcier must, in the course of nature, have died, for the man digressed into an account of the deep alchemical studies of the two wizards, father and son, speaking most particularly of the researches of Charles Le Sorcier concerning the elixir which should grant to him who partook of its eternal life and youth. His enthusiasm had seemed for the moment to remove from his terrible eyes the hatred that had first so haunted them, but suddenly the fiendish glare returned, and with a shocking sound like the hissing of a serpent, the stranger raised a glass phial with the evident intent of ending my life, as had Charles Le Sorcier 600 years before, and did that of my ancestor. Prompted by some preserving instinct of self-defense, I broke through the spell that had hitherto held me immovable, and flung my now dying torch at the creature who menaced my existence. I heard the file break harmlessly against the stones of the passage as the tunic of the strange man caught fire and lit the horrid scene with a ghastly radiance. The shriek of fright and impotent malice emitted by the would-be assassin proved too much for my already shaken nerves, and I fell prone upon the slimy floor in a total faint. When at last my senses returned, all was frightfully dark, and my mind, remembering what had occurred, shrank from the idea of beholding more. Yet curiosity overmastered all. Who, I asked myself, was this man of evil? And how came he within the castle walls? Why should he seek to avenge the death of poor Michael Mauvais? And how had the curse been carried on throughout all the long centuries since the time of Charles Le Sorcier? The dread of years was lifted from my shoulders, for I knew that he whom I had felled was the source of all my danger from the curse, and now that I was free, I burned with desire to learn more of this sinister thing which had haunted my line for centuries, and made of my own youth one long-continued nightmare. Determined upon further exploration, I felt in my pockets for flint and steel, and lit the unused torch which I had with me. First of all, the new light revealed the distorted and blackened form of this mysterious stranger. The hideous eyes were now closed. Disliking the sight, I turned away and entered the chamber beyond the Gothic door. Here I found what seemed much like an alchemist's laboratory. In one corner was an immense pile of shining yellow metal that sparkled gorgeously in the light of the torch. It may have been gold, but I did not pause to examine it, for I was strangely affected by that which I had undergone. At the farther end of the apartment was an opening leading out into one of the many wild ravines of the dark hillside forest. Filled with wonder, yet now realizing how the man had obtained access to this chateau, I proceeded to return. I had intended to pass by the remains of the stranger with averted face, but as I approached the body, I seemed to hear, emanating from it, a faint sound, as though life were not yet wholly extinct. Aghast, I turned to examine the charred and shriveled figure on the floor. Then, all at once, the horrible eyes, blacker even than the seared face in which they were set, opened wide with an expression which I was unable to interpret. The cracked lips tried to frame words which I could not well understand. Once I caught the name of Charles Le Sorcier, I again fancied that the words years and curse issued from the twisted mouth. Still, I was at loss to gather at the purport of his disconnected speech. At my evident ignorance of his meaning, the pitchy eyes once more flashed malevolently at me, until, helpless as I saw my opponent to be, I trembled as I watched him. Suddenly, the wretch, animated with his last burst of strength, raised his hideous head from the damp and sunken pavement. Then, as I remained, paralyzed with fear, he found his voice, and in his dying breath screamed forth words which have ever afterward haunted my days and my nights. "Fools," he shrieked, "can you not guess my secret? Have you no brain whereby you may recognize the will which has through 6 long centuries fulfilled the dreadful curse upon your house? Have I not told you of the great elixir of eternal life? Know you not how the secret of alchemy was solved? I tell you, it is I that have lived for 600 years to maintain my revenge, for I am Charles Le Sorcier." The end. Creepy ASMR. Oh, hey, Castlex, reading HP Lovecraft Live is straight up challenge mode without words. Oh, I'm a brave soul? I guess so. Thank you, Castelux. And yeah, no, I don't know how much of you heard, but yeah. Thank you, thank you. I'm not sure what to think of the story. I forget why I was so interested in it. Something about the devil and something about alchemy. That's all I remember. It was like a meme for a little bit. Let me see if I can find it. I'm gonna Google it. Give me one moment. Oh yeah, how'd you guys like it? Oh, excuse me. Oh, you can hear the actual page turning. That's not. Well, I have an actual book. Was good. I never read that one? Yeah, no, me neither. So I'm glad you liked it. Okay, knowing my meme. Alright, here, I'm gonna read the thing. Okay. Here we go. The funniest HP Lovecraft story is the one where some guy's family offended an evil wizard who then cursed his entire family by saying that all the men would die before they hit like 30. The protagonist is going crazy trying to find a spell to break the curse, and then the big reveal was that the wizard was literally just breaking into the house and killing them himself. That's why I heard of it. Now I remember. Let me go ahead and save that image. There we go. Yeah, the reveal is the dude was just manually cursing them by straight up doing everything himself. Yeah, he's still there. He actually had the Philosopher's Stone. Like, what a funny twist, lol. The thing is, I've heard enough resurrection stories and like sorcery stories that that's not too out of left field. But it must have been like shocking back in the day. Let me see. I got a lot of stuff. So how many stories do I got here? Okay, I got Dagon. Then the Cats of Ulthar. Oh gosh, Nyarlathotep. Do I want to try that? No, Azathoth. Let's go with Azathoth. 194. Alright. Give me one moment while I turn to the page and get a drink of water. Oh wow, that's not even a lot. It's like seriously 2 pages. Okay, give me one minute. Talk about holding a grudge, though. Getting offended and dedicating 600 years to just punking an entire family line. I mean, what else is he gonna do? I mean, if you were to... Okay, so before I start reading, let me go ahead and, like, bookmark this. It's such a short story. Like, if you were given eternal life... Like, let's ignore the fact that, you know, how you are living eternally. Like, what will you do at that point? I feel like if you couldn't die, no matter what, you'd be participating in a whole lot of shenanigans. So, you'd be pranking, like, world leaders and stuff, and, like, maneuvering things, like, behind the scenes, right? Basically, you're a god, right? I don't know. What would I do if I had eternal life? What would you do if you had eternal life? I don't know. Shenanigans is one way to put it. Yeah, no, I mean... The thing is, I would travel the world. I would go into the depths, and I guess if I can't die, I might just go down into the deepest part of the ocean and just, like, stay down there. I don't know. Just to, like, live there and, like, start building. Like a crazed Minecraft player trying to build a water base. If I didn't know how to stop it, my first order of business would be figuring out what the off switch to immortality was. Well, I mean, yeah, that's... That way you have an out in case things go to shit. But here's the thing. Okay, so eternal life. Does that mean you need to breathe? Or you have to think of something else? Actually, I'm going to change the music. Let's go ahead and... There we go. A little bit of... different ambiance. Like, at that point, are you just a body that exists without having to, like, eat, drink, or, you know, basically like a zombie, but you don't have to, like, not deteriorating. I'm trying to think. Because I could go into the ocean. I could go to the high, like, I could just live in the Himalayas. I could be like Bigfoot, actually. I'll just prank everybody. I'll just go into the Himalayas and just be Bigfoot. Just walk around. If it's not dying of old age, then I need to keep a low profile. Even being rich could be going too far, as I could still, like, get shot or something. Yeah, no, that's a thing. But yeah, there's just a lot of dependent things on what it means to be immortal. So, like, every time you die, maybe there's, like, what's it called? Like, a time before you respawn back on Earth. Real talk, if I can get immortal, it stands to reason that other people can too. So I'd probably try to find them all for fun. That's true. Actually, could you make immortal children, or what? Like, would it be the Greek god situation, you think? Because I would say, if it was like the Greek god situation, I would try to make half immortals as much as I could, and then, you know, go for it. First priority would be making sure the other people don't realize I'm immortal. I mean, yeah, I guess so. Like, if they kill me, I stay dead. I don't know if I can turn off my... Well... Would I be able to turn off my body functions so I can pretend to be dead for a while? Oh, hi, little Ricky. Procrastinating isn't helping me. It's 9:30. Oh, no. I believe in you, little Ricky. It's okay. We're talking about immortality and what we could probably do. What we would do. But yeah, there's a lot of things. Like, if you could just launch me to space and my body wouldn't, you know, die, I would like that too. I just go to Mars and just, like, explore every single planet. You're just gonna wing it? Okay, fair enough. Yeah, but you have kids and the other parents still die. Sad. Oh yeah, then you're stuck with immortal kids, or which one of them ends up being kind of a jerk. Nightmare scenario. Skydiving without a parachute? I mean, you could do that. But wouldn't it get boring after a while? Because the fear you get from it, the thrill of it, would be like falling through the sky. Because and just like knowing that once you hit the ground, there is a chance you'll die. But if there's no chance you die, where's the thrill of it? I wouldn't have any kids for the fear that they wouldn't also be immortal. Oh yeah, if you're immortal in space, how are you moving? That's an important question that I don't have answers for. Okay, so first, become a scientist. Learn how propulsion works. Make a jetpack. Learn how you can propel yourself in space with that jetpack without needing a lot of stuff besides whatever's already in space. Toot your way across the galaxy. Oh, man. I mean, okay, so you don't die, but you always return back to the same body. Or is it that you're reincarnated into, like, a newer body? Because will you inherit also the bodily damage? Or will you just regenerate? I feel like you just regenerate in this instance. Just, like, looking at that, looking at the Alchemist story. I guess he just regenerates. Optional respawn would be better than immortality. A choice. The human brain has a limit on how much it can accept. Would immortality remove those limitations? That's a good question, actually. Because if your brain's not deteriorating, there's so many more possibilities that, like, a lot of situations your brain can accept. If that's the case, you could live forever and become brain dead. Ah, yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying now. I guess if your brain doesn't regenerate, yeah, you just become a puddle. You just sit there, breathing and living until, well, the thing is you need your brain for the other functions, so honestly you just still die, so your brain has to regenerate at that point. Alright. You know what? Alright, let's go ahead and move on to the next story. Unless you guys have something else to say, I'll give it a moment, because I need to open my book anyways. And this is gonna be really short. Okay, I'm gonna turn back to the haunt. Highly recommend reading the manga Fire Punch if you're interested in the implication of immortality. From the same author of Chainsaw Man. Oh, sweet, okay. Fire Punch. Gotcha. I'll go ahead and put that in my Discord suggestions list for anime. Interesting. The human brain can store about 343 years of information? How did we determine that many years? That said, I can understand at least... Do they mean historically can we store that much? Or, I don't know. You just become little five-head when you get enough memories. Okay. I'm trying to think about what they mean by 343 years. Like, is it a historical thing? Like, over the years? Like, the amount of data space? Or is it just in general? If there's, like, certain... I don't know. Pieces of information. Will that happen? Alright. Let's see if this is working. Okay. Alright. I mean, it's not like we even remember anything anyways. I say the most important 340 years of information storing would be enough. The brain can store 2.5 million gigabytes. That's a lot of memory. Like, I can believe that, though. Like, I have a lot of memories. And then also, like, deep within my brain, there are many layers. Oh, I should tell you about the dream I had. And, like, I guess I'll explain that later. First, let's, hold on. First, alright, cool. I'm gonna readjust and we're gonna read Azathoth. Azathoth by HP Lovecraft. When age fell upon the world, and wonder went out of the minds of men, when grey cities reared to smoky skies, tall towers grim and ugly, in whose shadow none might dream of the sun or of spring's flowering meads, when learning stripped earth of her mantle of beauty, and poets sang no more save of the twisted phantom seen with bleared and inward-looking eyes, when these things have come to pass, and childish hopes had gone away forever, there was a man who traveled out of life on a quest to the spaces whither the world's dreams had fled. Of the name and abode of this man, but little is written, for they were out of the waking world only, yet it is said that both were obscure. It is enough to know that he dwelt in a city of high walls where sterile twilight reigned, and that he toiled all day among shadow and turmoil, coming home at evening to a room whose one window opened not unto the fields and groves, but on a dim court where other windows stared in dull despair. From that casement one might see only walls and windows, except sometimes when one leaned far out and peered aloft at the small stars that passed. And because mere walls and windows must soon drive to madness a man who dreams and reads much, the dweller in that room used night after night to lean out and peer aloft to glimpse some fragment of things beyond the waking world and the grayness of tall cities. After years he began to call the slow-sailing stars by name, and to follow them in fancy when they glided regretfully out of sight, till at length his vision opened to many secret vistas whose existence no common eye suspects. And one night a mighty gulf was bridged, and the dream-haunted sky swells down to the lonely watcher's window to merge with the close air of his room and make him a part of their fabulous wonder. There came to that room wild streams of violet midnight glittering with dust of gold, vortices of dust and fire, swirling out of the ultimate spaces and heavy with perfumes from beyond the other worlds. Opiate oceans poured there, litten by suns that the eye may never behold, and having in their whirlpools strange dolphins and sea nymphs of unrememberable deeps. Noiseless infinity eddied around the dreamer and wafted him away without even touching the body that leaned stiffly from the lonely window. And for days, not counted in men's calendars, the tides of far spears bear him gently to join the dreams for which he longed, the dreams that men have lost. And in the course of many cycles, they tenderly left him sleeping on a green sunrise shore, a green shore fragrant with lotus blossoms and starred by red camelotes. The end. Literally 2 pages. Let's see. Would you rather gain twice your weight but become the strongest human ever, or lose half your weight and become the fastest human ever? I would say the latter, so half my weight and become fastest. Mostly because I'm used to that anyways. I don't weigh that much. I would rather be that. Yeah. Dreams, huh? That is actually really vague. But I kind of understand it when I think about it. Because, like, when I think about it, like, even my own dreams, I've created a city. Like, every night, I go back to the city, and everything has their own place, and it feels all familiar to me at that time. But it's like a memory in itself, so... If weighing half as much just means you're shorter to compensate, but fast, that's awesome. Like, a pint-sized anime protagonist sprinting around at 40 miles per hour. Oh yeah, no, that would be me. I would like to be that. Right. So let me think. I'm going to try to think now about my dream from last night, because it was seriously strange. Because in my dreams, there was usually like 3 places that always pop up. It's a convention center. It's I guess one of my high schools and or college towns. It's either it switches between them, and then another is like a city that's like very crowded together, but next to an airport. And it's always next to the airport. I don't know how to explain it, but that's where my brain has basically placed all these places, and I go back to it every night. And the smaller you are, the sneakier you are. Major boost to stealth and speed. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they'll probably hear the wind whistling by, but that's about it, as long as I get far enough. Put a sayings to shame. Last night I dreamt about studying, like I was studying in my sleep. Oh, I mean, that's... I've done that before, but I also feel like I hallucinated a whole lot of stuff while I was studying. Those are, like, really, really rough to get through. Studying dreams. You dream about cons all the time, too? Yeah, no. When I dream about conventions, it's like, I'm meeting a lot of people I want to meet. Let me think. Who did I meet the last time? It might have been some voice actors, actually. Actually, it could have been Dante Bosco, actually. Just hanging out, eating pancit, and I'm just like, wow, pancit, and he's like, yeah, pancit, and he's Filipino too, by the way. And I'm just like, okay, cool. And then I would walk away and go find some food for my own because I'm hungry, and then like pass by some like rooms that are holding some what's it called? Shoot, why am I forgetting the word for it? Panels. Oh my goodness. I don't know, cons are really fun, but I feel like that's the best place, like the most lucid kind of place to be in. Because that reality hits me so hard when I'm at a con. Dante Bosco, dream Dream You has fantastic things. Well, yeah, I mean, Dream Me, when it's, I think I was thinking about Dante Bosco, because I was thinking about maybe Avatar, and then, like, maybe there's something else that I was thinking about. Usually, if I think of Dante Bosco, it's because I think of Zuko, and that's it. I can't tell if I'm weak or if it just fell real hard. Oh no! Mine are always like, I did everything I wanted to except for one little thing that I end up upset about, and then I wake up feeling like I missed out on something. Ah, I hate those dreams. Like, my dreams are like a conglomeration of, like, people I've met over the years, and they're all there. When it's all the convention dreams. People who I actually do see at conventions, and then people, like, sometimes you show up, David, and then I'm just like, wow, amazing. My brain. I haven't seen you in forever, and then I wake up and I realize, wait, it's been so long. You dropped 30 pounds on your toe. Why would you do that? Oh. It was an accident, though, right, little Ricky? Ugh. Blech. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We saw each other at a con the last time. Wait. Reading? Yeah. Oh, hey, Floof, what's up? Yeah, we're reading. Chains. Aww. But yeah, we're just talking right now, like, about dreams. And, like, how weird they get. But yeah, I have reoccurring dreams of certain places. And always, it's like, either I'm volunteering at a convention, or it's like the weekend before it, where it's like, before everybody comes in, it's just me signing up, or even afterwards, and I'm just like, I forgot to go to the convention, and I forgot to volunteer, help! And it's so weird. Imaginary celebrities are greater than real celebrities. The only kind of nightmare I get is basically one that starts with my having done something horrible or illegal. Dream starts after I did it, apparently, and now I have to deal with the fallout. Ooh! Yeah, AX, right before the pandemic. Lots of dreams since then. Yeah, no, I haven't been to AX in a while. I want to go. I have a dream from when I was 3 that scared me. You know Ursula from The Little Mermaid? Yeah, I do. Uh-oh. You're starting to, like, bring up all the anime and cartoon dreams that I have. It's mostly anime, though. Okay, go ahead, Floof. You had a dream. That she turned me into a potion in some underwater cave. Ooh. That's not good. Anyone here have nightmares about natural disasters? I do! I guess the cave had plumbing because there was a toilet. I guess so, but then that begs the question. Do they poop? Do mermaids poop? And which end? And she held the vial of me over the toilet. Oh, no. No, no, no. Oh, no. And I said, I don't want to go down the toilet. No, I would probably scream that too. I get War of the Worlds style nightmares sometimes, but I always think it's so cool and I don't get scared. Doesn't count as a natural disaster, though. And she flushed you down the toilet. Ah, the sea toilet. Blech. Yeah. How was it down the toilet? How vivid was it for you to go down the toilet? Or was it just like, bleh? Oh, and then you woke up. There you go. You flushed yourself out of the dream. Good job. No, I can understand that, though. Oh my god. So, okay, this wasn't a convention, but it was basically like, think of like a Japanese festival. And this was like, not this night, but the night before. No, it was Ursula. Also, I had a dream recently. Okay, cool. I'm gonna tell my dream and then you can tell your, like, type up your dream and I'll read it out. Okay. So the dream I had the other day was I had my high school peeps all around me at the festival. I don't know what kind of festival it really was, but it was really dark and there were like stalls and stuff. And we're just like talking, you know? And as we passed by one area, apparently it was like, there was like a boxing challenge that allowed friends, you know, to box each other. And so, I guess we'll call him a friend, an acquaintance. He's basically kind of like a macho-y kind of man, but he's like, how do I explain it? Like, he's funny, but he's also like really macho-y, even though he's not like, you know, muscly. But he likes to prove his manhood, I guess. So he was in my dream. He was basically being all cocky and stuff and saying, "Hey, yeah, come on, someone come and fight me." And No one was really taking up the thing except I volunteered to fight him. And because it's my dream, Dreamy decides to sky uppercut him. Like, the moment the round starts. And just, like, punt him up into the air, and then he just falls down. And I win. Of course I win. It's my dream. But, once that happened, I was just, like, you know, laughing and, like, celebrating. Because, yeah, you know, I punched him out. And so I left the festival with some friends. And we're driving off in, like, a Jeep or something. I don't even know why it was a Jeep. But it was a Jeep. Because as we were driving, we're, like, driving down the road and it's surrounded by cornfields. And when I hear, like, a revving noise behind me, and I could see a tractor with some other friends and the guy that I just knocked out just, like, hauling up behind us. And I'm just like, they're just in the cornfield, and then he's shouting, "Hey, I want a rematch in the cornfield." And I'm like, hell yeah. Alright, let's go in the cornfield and fight again. But we didn't have, like, mitts. So, when we all parked in the cornfield, we started slapping each other. We didn't punch each other. We were just, like, trying to keep our distance and basically just slap fighting each other. I don't know why. But after a while, our friends, like, I don't know why my brain decided to do this to me, but it was like, all the friends in that circle were like, "Hey, guys, you're not even fighting. Chill." And then we just, like, out of embarrassment, stop and just, like, hang out in the cornfield for a bit, like a little powwow. No one ever found us. And eventually I would have woken up from that dream, but it was so weird. I don't know why my brain wanted me to fight in a cornfield, but hey, I can say I fought in a cornfield. Asterisk in a dream. Chain of events. I hurt my palm. I pick up a big heavy bag, but end up dropping it on my toe because of my palm. Because it was slippery? Well, yeah, because of the pain? Man. Yeah, no, it's weird. Sorry about it. It's a weird dream. I'm pretty much the protagonist of my dreams, of course. And all the good things happen in my dreams, usually. Or weird things. But yeah, lots of things happen to me in my dreams, of course. Lol, we got embarrassed at how weird the dream was and started chilling. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, right. Maybe we should stop fighting each other. Yeah, dreams are weird. Yes, actually, you're not wrong. Everything seems so much slower. But yeah, I'm so sorry, little Ricky. I hope your toe's okay. Honestly, I hope it didn't, like, start bleeding or anything like that. Bro, in a dream, I recently saw that Elizabeth Holmes girl. Oh, really? But it didn't look exactly like her. But I knew it was her. No, I get that. No. Oh my gosh. And she gave me that sociopath stare. Oh, ooh. You know, she's like a robot. A little robot. What lie did she tell you? What's it about there? But did you get mad at her? I'm super slow in dreams as well. Unless I'm running backwards. Then it's lightning and it's consistent rule for me. Oh, God. That is so weird, though. Like, how your brain just associates certain things with certain things. No, it wasn't about Theranos? Okay, cool. At least it's not like my brother's toe. The whole toe came off its bedding. Like, the whole thing was dislodged and fell off. What the heck happened to it? Maybe I shouldn't ask that. Like, I get hangnails on my toenails, and it's, like, painful. That sounds worse. Ugh. He stubbed it? How hard did he stub it? And again, well... like, growing that back even is hard. It's super hard. Ugh. But yeah. Let me see. I'm gonna see if I can find another story. They're always hanging... Bro, I hate hangnails. They're always loitering around. They're always hanging around loitering. Oh, that's what you like to loiter, little Ricky? I see. Oh, I wanna... Okay, I know which one. The Color Out of Space. Oh, so... my favorite movie with Nick Cage in it. It was mentioned like on a different stream because I had to think about it. But I like The Color Out of Space. If anything, I really would like to watch that with you guys on Discord. By the way, David, if you're still here, join Discord. My Discord. It's in my description link. But yeah, I'd like to watch that with you guys because it's super funny. Because you watch Nick Cage become unhinged. Yes, I know. Yeah, I am Floof. I told you this already. I am watching Mr. Robot. Hang on, she'll be arrested. They're always hanging around me. Creepy. Yeah, no. It'd be super fun. How much have you watched? Oh, Mr. Robot? I haven't started episode 3. I was gonna do that tonight after the stream. But yeah, basically, like I said, it takes me a while to get through stuff. No, wait, I started episode 3, and I'm only halfway through, and then the power went out for some reason. I don't know what's going on where I live, but the power has been, like, flickering on and off. I think it's the ghosts in my city. I think they're really angry at us. You gotta take off Castlex? Okay, P.S. Rimworld, yes, I remember that. That's what I wanted to play, honestly, today, but I was like, I want to read today. So, yeah. Season 3 was crazy, and 4. Little Ricky. Okay, cool. Cool. Y'all have a good day. But yeah, go ahead and join. And then Season 4 can be only described in one word. Heartbreaking. Oh, ooh, I don't know how I'm gonna feel, but that's good. Yeah, no, the power outages are not fun. I live in Texas, so there's a joke in there. And it's almost election season, but I won't talk about that. But just to let you know, something weird is happening. Yeah, no, it's been happening consistently around the same time. It happened... Didn't happen today. It did happen yesterday and the day before. But yeah, it's strange. It's so strange, and I hate it. Because then I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna stop for the day and not play my games until, like, I'm done with dinner. Because it'll come back on immediately, but I just feel like turning on my computer and be like, yeah, it's off for the moment. I'm gonna go downstairs, just hang out, and cook. And then I come backstairs, and then I game for like a couple of hours. It's a time of year where it gets freezing at night, but not hot or warm during the day. Yeah. I don't know. Like, it was cold yesterday. Pretty cold, like 40 degrees. And then it jumped up today. So I'm just like on the seat of my pants looking at all of this weather. But yeah, I think Sunday, I don't have anything Sunday, right? Let me check my calendar. Yeah, Sunday, this Sunday, the 23rd, I guess I want to watch The Color Out of Space, because I have the movie on, like, DVD, and I needed to connect this new CD drive and use it, so, yeah. What do you mean it was snowing lightly? Right, you're in Canada, right? It could be snowing lightly. It melted as it landed because it was warm. I'm getting worried now. Don't tell me that it's snowing. That means it's gonna snow, or, like, be really cold this year. No. Yeah, ground too warm. Like, I don't think snow would stay here, but the last time we had the winter storm here in Texas, it froze the streets, and everybody was slipping and sliding all over the place because we don't know how to drive in snow or ice. So that wasn't fun. And also the power was out. It really sucked. So yeah. No, the snow, not snow that was visible. It was clearly not rain is all. It felt too slow to be rain, and the snow was bad. I remember it. Was that like 2020, I think. No, 2021. I think? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so, I mean, it did snow. We did have a hurricane hit our side of Texas. Yeah, there probably was snow in 2017. Honestly, there has been, but it wasn't as bad as the ice storm of, like, that one year where it knocked out all the power and a lot of us were just, like, trying to survive. I'm just hoping it won't snow again. I'm pretty sure if we're having outages now, we're gonna have problems later. So hopefully I will be able to stream, but let's hope that nothing hits this side. I live in a relatively new neighborhood with like generators and stuff, so we should be okay. But I don't know. If anything, the internet will be out, and that's the only thing that will be problematic. And I'll just sit on the ground and make like crafts. Alright, let's see. Alrighty then. Let me pick this up. And let's see how many. Oh, that's a pretty long story. Oh my gosh, it is pretty long. Okay, let's see if I can get through this. Alright, final story of the night, guys. Drink some water. Yeah, there was a meme about that. Like, anything, like, in states that do not have, like, salt, are, like, prepare for snow occurrences, it's an emergency. It's always an emergency. Because no one knows how to drive. Well, it's been 69 minutes, so nice. One inch of snow is common on Halloween here. Oh god, I can't imagine that. Snow on Halloween? I just dressed up as Santa Claus. I'd be taking the candy instead of giving it away. Funny number. Yeah. Alright. Alright, let me grab my back. Let's get ready. Alright. Last story of the night, guys. The Color Out of Space by HP Lovecraft. West of Arkham, the hills rise wild, and there are valleys with deep woods that no axe has ever cut. There are dark, narrow glens where the trees slope fantastically, and where the thin brooklets trickle without ever having caught the glint of sunlight. On the gentler slopes, there are farms, ancient and rocky, with squat, moss-coated cottages brooding eternally over New England secrets in the lee of great ledges. But these are all vacant now, the wide chimneys crumbling, and the shingled sides bulging perilously beneath low gambrel roofs. The old folk have gone away, and foreigners do not like to live there. French Canadians have tried it, Italians have tried it, and the Poles have come and departed. It is not because of anything that can be seen or heard or handled, but because of something that is imagined. The place is not good for the imagination, and does not bring restful dreams at night. It must be this which keeps the foreigners away, for old Ammi Pierce has never told them of anything he recalls from the strange days. Ammi, whose head has been a little queer for years, is the only one who still remains, or whoever talks of the strange days, and he dares to do this because his house is so near the open fields and the traveled roads around Arkham. Oh, why does the witch hat don't move? It's because it's just a picture. It's not attached to my head. Guess what? Ah. I mean, it'll probably so soon if it's any by indication of Floof's telling, but we'll see. There was once a road over the hills and through the valleys that ran straight where the blasted heath is now, but people ceased to use it, and a new road was laid, curving far toward the south. Traces of the old one can be still found amidst the weeds of returning wilderness, and some of them will doubtless linger even when half of the hollows are flooded for the new wet reservoir. Then the dark woods will be cut down, and the blasted heath will slumber far below blue waters, whose surface will mirror the sky and ripple in the sun. And the secrets of the strange days will be one with the deep secrets. One with the hidden lore of old ocean and all the mystery of a primal earth. When I went into the hills and vales to survey for the new reservoir, they had told me the place was evil. They told me this in Arkham, and because that is a very old town full of witch legends, I thought the evil must be something which grandams had whispered to children through centuries. The name Blasted Heath seemed to me very odd and theatrical, and I wondered how it had come into the folklore of a Puritan people. Then I saw that dark westward tangle of glens and slopes for myself, and ceased to wonder at anything besides its own elder mystery. It was morning when I saw it, but shadow lurked always there. The trees grew too thickly, and their trunks were too big for any healthy New England wood. There was too much silence in the dim alleys between them, and the floor was too soft with the dank moss and mattings of infinite years of decay. I mean, it's supposed to be normal for you to have your leg to be hurt after, falling. Make sure to rest. No, just make sure to rest, because there's going to be some aftershock pain of some sort. That, and maybe get some ice if it's like hurting really, really bad. Because if it's bruised, yeah, definitely get that treated with something else. Warm compress or cold compress. I don't remember which. But yeah, get that treated. In the open spaces, mostly along the line of the old road, there were little hillside farms, sometimes with all the buildings standing, sometimes with only one or two, and sometimes with only a lone chimney or fast-filling cellar. Weeds and briars reigned, and furtive wild things rustled in the undergrowth. Upon everything was a haze of restlessness and oppression, a touch of the unreal and the grotesque, as if some vital element of perspective, or, chiaroscuro were awry. I did not wonder that the foreigners would not stay, for this was no region to sleep in. It was too much like a landscape of Salvator Rosa, too much like some forbidden woodcut in a tale of terror. But even all this was not so bad as the Blasted Heath. I knew it the moment I came upon it at the bottom of a spacious valley, for no other name could fit such a thing, or any other thing fit such a name. It was as if the poet had coined the phrase from having seen this one particular region. It must, I thought as I had viewed it, be the outcome of a fire. But why had nothing new ever grown over those 5 acres of grey desolation that sprawled open to the sky like a great spot eaten by acid in the woods and fields? It lay largely to the north of the ancient road line, but encroached a little on the other side. I felt an awed reluctance about approaching, and did so at last only because my business took me through and past it. There was no vegetation of any kind on that broad expanse, but only a fine grey dust or ash which no wind seemed to ever blow about. The trees near it were sickly and stunted, and many dead trunks stood or lay rotting at the rim. As I walked hurriedly by, I saw the tumbled bricks and stones of an old chimney and cellar on my right, and the yawning black maw of an abandoned well whose stagnant vapors played strange tricks with the hues of the sunlight. Even the long, dark woodland climbed beyond what seemed welcome in contrast, and I marveled no more at the frightened whispers of Arkham people. There had been no house or ruin near. Even in the old days of the place must have been lonely and remote. And at twilight, dreading to repass that ominous spot, I walked circuitously back to the town by the curving road on the south. I vaguely wished some clouds would gather, for an odd timidity about the deep sky-id voids above had crept into my soul. Would I rather have owned a unicorn or dragon? They're the same size and you choose the size. Oh, I'd say a unicorn. That'd be cool. I mean, it wouldn't do anything. It was just you're gonna go to sleep, little Rookie? Go ahead, study. Good luck. Good luck on your test. Thanks for coming by. Alright. In the evening, I asked old people in Arkham about the Blasted Heath, and what was meant by that phrase, strange days, which so many evasively muttered. I could not, however, get any good answers, except that all the mystery was much more recent than I had dreamed. It was not a matter of old legendary at all, but something within the lifetime of those who spoke. It had happened in the 80s, and a family had disappeared or was killed. Speakers would not be exact, and because they all told me to pay no attention to old Ammi Pierce's crazy tales, I sought him out the next morning, having heard that he lived alone in the ancient tottering cottage where the trees first begin to get very thick. It was a fearsomely archaic place, and had begun to exude the faint miasmal odor which clings about houses that have stood too long. Only with persistent knocking could I arouse the aged man, and when he shuffled timidly through the door, I could tell he was not glad to see me. He was not so feeble as I expected, but his eyes drooped in a curious way, and his unkempt clothing and white beard made him seem very worn and dismal. Not knowing just how he could be launched on his tales, I feigned a matter of business, told him of my surveying, and asked vague questions about the district. He was far brighter and more educated than I had been led to think, and before I knew it, I had grasped quite as much of the subject as any man I had talked with in Arkham. He was not like other rustics I had known in the sections where reservoirs were to be. From him there were no protests at the miles of old wood and farmland to be blotted out, though perhaps there would have been had not his home lain outside the bounds of the future lake. Relief was all that he shewed, relief at the doom of the dark ancient valleys through which he had roamed all his life. They were better under water now, better under water since the strange days, and with this opening his husky voice sank low, while his body leaned forward, and his right forefinger began to point shakily and impressively. It was then that I heard the story, and as the rambling voice scraped and whispered on, I shivered again and again despite the summer day. Often I had to recall the speaker from ramblings, piece out scientific points which he knew only by a fading parrot memory of professor's talk, or bridge over gaps where his sense of logic and continuity broke down. When he was done, I did not wonder that his mind had snapped a trifle, or that the folk of Arkham would not speak much of the blasted heath. I hurried back before sunset to my hotel, unwillingly to have the stars come out above me in the open, and the next day returned to Boston to give up my position. I could not go into that dim chaos of old forest and slope again, or face another time that gray blasted heath, where the black well yawned deep beside the tumbled bricks and stone. The reservoir will soon be built now, and all those elder secrets will be safe forever under watery fathoms. But even then I do not believe I would like to visit that country by night, at least not when the sinister stars are out, and nothing could bribe me to drink the new city water of Arkham. It all began, old Ammi said, with the meteorite. Before that time, there had been no wild legends at all, since the witch trials, and even then these western woods were not feared half so much as a small island in the Miskatonic, where the devil held court beside a curious stone altar older than the Indians. These were not haunted woods, and their fantastic dusk was never terrible till the strange days. Then there had come a white noontide cloud, that string of explosions in the air, and that pillar of smoke from the valley far in the wood. And by night, all Arkham had heard of the great rock that fell out of the sky and bedded itself in the ground beside the well at the Nahum Gardner place. That was the house which had stood where the blasted heath was to come, the trim white Nahum Gardner house amidst its fertile gardens and orchards. Nahum had come to town to tell people about the stone, and had dropped in at Ammi Pierce's on the way. Ammi was 40 then, and all the queer things were fixed very strongly in his mind. He and his wife had gone with 3 professors from Miskatonic University, who hastened out the next morning to see the weird visitor from unknown stellar space, and had wondered why Nahum had called it so large the day before. It had shrunk, Nahum said as he pointed out the big brownish mound above the ripped earth and charred grass near the archaic well sweep in his front yard. But the wise men answered that the stones do not shrink. Its heat lingered persistently, and Nahum declared it had glowed faintly in the night. The professors tried it with a geologist's hammer and found it was oddly soft. It was in truth so soft as to be almost plastic, and they gouged rather than chipped a specimen to take back to the college for testing. They took it in an old pail borrowed from Nahum's kitchen, for even the small piece refused to grow cool. On the trip back, they stopped at Amy's to rest, and seemed thoughtful when Miss Pierce remarked that the fragment was growing smaller and burning the bottom of the pail. Truly, it was not large, but perhaps they had taken less than they thought. The day after that, all of this was in June of '82. The professors had trooped out again in a great excitement. As they passed Amy's, they told him what queer things the specimen had done, and how it faded wholly away when they put it in a glass beaker. The beaker had gone too, and the wise men talked of the strange stone's affinity for silicon. It had acted quite unbelievably in that well-ordered laboratory, doing nothing at all and showing no occluded gases when heated on charcoal, being wholly negative in the borax speed, and soon proving itself absolutely non-volatile at any producible temperature, including that of the oxyhydrogen blowpipe. On an anvil, it appeared highly malleable, and in the dark its luminosity was very marked. Yeah, it's on my end, don't worry, it's my end. My dog was barking a little bit. Somebody must be at the door, or standing near the door, meaning at the sidewalk near the door. Stubbornly, refusing to grow cool, it soon had the college in a state of real excitement, and when upon heating before the spectroscope, it displayed shining bands unlike any known colors of the normal spectrum, there was much breathless talk of new elements, bizarre optical properties, and other things which puzzled men of science are wont to say when faced by the unknown. Hot as it was, they tested it in a crucible with all the proper reagents. Water did nothing. Hydrochloric acid was the same. Nitric acid and even aqua regia merely hissed and spattered against its torrid invulnerability. Amy had difficulty in recalling all these things, but recognized some solvents as I mentioned them, in the usual order of use. There were ammonia and caustic soda, alcohol and ether, nauseous carbon disulfide, and a dozen others. But although the weight grew steadily less as time passed, and the fragments seemed to be slightly cooling, there was no change in the solvents to show that they had attacked the substance at all. It was a metal, though, beyond a doubt. It was magnetic, for one thing, and after its immersion in the acid solvents, there seemed to be faint traces of the Widsmanstatin figures found on the meteoric iron. When the cooling had grown very considerable, the testing was carried on in glass, and it was in a glass beaker that they left all the chips made of the original fragment during the work. The next morning, both chips and the beaker were gone without a trace, and only a charred spot marked the place on the wooden shelf where they had been. All this the professors had told Amy as they paused at his door, and once more he went with them to see the stony messenger from the stars, though this time his wife did not accompany him. It had now most certainly shrunk, and even the sober professors could not doubt the truths of what they saw. All around the dwindling brown lump near the well was a vacant space where the earth had caved in, and whereas it had been a good 7 feet across the day before, it was now scarcely 5. It was still hot, and the sages studied its surface curiously as they detached another and larger piece with hammer and chisel. They gouged deeply this time, and as they pried away the smaller mass, they saw that the core of the thing was not quite homogeneous. They had uncovered what seemed to be the side of a large colored globule embedded in the substance. The color, which resembled some of the bands in the meteor's strange spectrum, was almost impossible to describe, and it was only by analogy that they called it color at all. Its texture was glossy, and upon tapping it appeared to promise both brittleness and hollowness. One of the professors gave it a smart blow with the hammer, and it burst with a nervous little pop. Nothing was emitted, and all traces of the thing vanished with the puncturing. It left behind a hollow spherical space about 3 inches across, and all thought it was probable that others would be discovered as the enclosing substance wasted away. Conjecture was vain, so after a futile attempt to find additional globules by the drilling, the seekers left again with their new specimen, which proved, however, as baffling in the laboratory as its predecessor had been. Aside from being almost plastic, having heat, magnetism, and slight luminosity, cooling slightly in powerful acids, possessing an unknown spectrum, wasting away in air, and attacking silicon compounds with mutual destruction as a result, it presented no identifying features whatsoever. And at the end of the tests, the college scientists were forced to own that they could not place it. It was nothing of this earth, but a piece of the great outside, and as was dowered with outside properties and obedient to outside laws. That night there was a thunderstorm, and when the professors went out to Nahum's the next day, they met with a bitter disappointment. The stone, magnetic as it had been, must have had some peculiar electrical property, for it had drawn the lightning, as Nahum said, with a singular persistence. 6 times within an hour the farmer saw the lightning strike the furrow in the front yard, and when the storm was over nothing remained but a ragged pit by the ancient well sweep, half choked with caved-in earth. Digging had borne no fruit, and the scientists verified the fact of the utter vanishment. The failure was total, so that nothing was left to do but to go back to the laboratory and test again the disappearing fragment left carefully cased in lead. That fragment lasted a week, at the end of which nothing of value had been learned of it. When it had gone, no residue was left behind, and in time the professors felt scarcely sure that they had indeed seen with waking eyes that cryptic vestige of the fathomless gulfs outside, that lone weird message from other universes and other realms of matter, force, and entity. As was natural, the Arkham papers made much of the incident with its collegiate sponsoring, and sent reporters to talk with Nahum Gardner and his family. At least one Boston daily also sent a scribe, and Nahum quickly became a kind of local celebrity. He was a lean, genial person of about 50, living with his wife and 3 sons on the pleasant farmstead in the valley. He and Amy exchanged visits frequently, as did their wives, and Amy had nothing but praise for him after all these years. He seemed slightly proud of the notice his place had attracted, and talked often of the meteorite in the succeeding weeks. That July and August were hot, and Nahum worked hard at his haying in the 10-acre pasture across Chapman's Brook, his rattling wain wearing deep ruts in the shadowy lanes between. The labor tired him more than it had in other years, and he felt that age was beginning to tell on him. Then fell the time of fruit and harvest. The pears and apples slowly ripened, and Nahum vowed that his orchards were prospering as never before. The fruit was growing to phenomenal size and unwanted gloss, and in such abundance that extra barrels were ordered to handle the future crop. But with the ripening came sore disappointment, for all of that gorgeous array of specious lusciousness was not one single jot was fit to eat. Into the fine flavor of the pears and apples had crept a stealthy bitterness and sickishness, so that even the smallest of bites induced a lasting disgust. It was that same with the melons and tomatoes, and Nahum sadly saw that his entire crop was lost. Quick to connect events, he declared that the meteorite had poisoned the soil, and thanked heaven that most of the other crops were in the upland lot along the road. Winter came early, and was very cold, Amy saw Nahum less often than usual, and observed that he had begun to look worried. The rest of his family, too, seemed to have grown taciturn, and were far from steady in their church-going or their attendance at the various social events of the countryside. For this reserve, or melancholy, no cause could be found, though all of the household confessed now and then to poorer health and a feeling of vague disquiet. Nahum himself gave the most definite statement of anyone when he said he was disturbed about certain footprints in the snow. They were the usual winter prints of red squirrels, white rabbits, and foxes, but the brooding farmer professed to see something not quite right about their nature and arrangement. He was never specific, but appeared to think that they were not characteristic of the anatomy and habits of squirrels and rabbits and foxes as they ought to be. Amy listened without interest to this talk until one night when he drove past Nahum's house in his sleigh on the way back from Clark's Corners. There had been a moon, and a rabbit had run across the road, and the leaps of that rabbit were longer than either Amy or his horse liked. The latter, indeed, had almost run away when brought up by a firm rein. Thereafter, Amy gave Nahum's tales more respect, and wondered why the gardener dogs seemed so cowed and quivering every morning. They had, it developed, nearly lost the spirit to bark. Poor dogs. In February, the McGregor boys from Meadow Hill were out shooting woodchucks, and not far from the gardener place bagged a very peculiar specimen. The proportions of its body seemed slightly altered in a queer way, impossible to describe, while its face had taken on an expression which no one ever saw in a woodchuck before. The boys were genuinely frightened, and threw the thing away at once, so that only their grotesque tales of it ever reached the people of the countryside. But the shying away of the horses near Nahum's house had now become an acknowledged thing, and all the basis for a cycle of whispered legend was fast taking form. People vowed that the snow melted faster around Nahum's than it did anywhere else, and in early March there was an odd discussion in Potter's General Store at Clark's Corner. Stephen Rice had driven past gardeners in the morning, and had noticed the skunk cabbages coming up through the mud by the woods across the road. Never were things of such size seen before, and they held strange colors that could not be put into any words. Their shapes were monstrous, and the horse had snorted at an odor which struck Stephen as wholly unprecedented. That afternoon, several persons drove past to see the abnormal growth, and all agreed that plants of that kind ought never to sprout in a healthy world. The bad fruit of the fall before was freely mentioned, and it went from mouth to mouth that there was poison in Nahum's ground. Of course it was the meteorite, and remembering how strange the men from the college had found that stone to be, several farmers spoke about the matter to them. One day they paid Nahum a visit, but having no love of wild tales and folklore, were very conservative in what they inferred. The plants were certainly odd, but all skunk cabbages are more or less odd in shape, and odor, and hue. Perhaps some mineral element from the stone had entered the soil, but it would soon be washed away. And as for the footprints and frightened horses, of course this was mere country talk, which such a phenomenon as the aerolite would be certain to start. There was really nothing for serious men to do in cases of wild gossip, for superstitious rustics will say and believe anything. And so, through all the strange days, the professor stayed away in contempt. Only one of them, when given 2 phials of dust for analysis in a police job over a year and a half later, recalled that the queer color of that skunk cabbage had been very like the one of the anomalous bands of light shown by the meteor fragment in the college spectroscope, and like the brittle globule found embedded in the stone from the abyss. The samples in this analysis case gave the same odd bands at first, though later they lost the property. The trees budded prematurely around Nahum's, and at night they swayed ominously in the wind. Nahum's second son, Thaddeus, a lad of 15, swore that they swayed also when there was no wind. But even gossips would not credit this. Certainly, however, restlessness was in the air. The entire Gardner family developed the habit of stealthy listening, though not for any sound which they could consciously name. The listening was indeed rather a product of moments when consciousness seemed half to slip away. Unfortunately, such moments increased week by week, till it became common speech that something was wrong with all the Nahum's folks. When the early saxifrage came out of it, it had another strange color, not quite like that of the skunk cabbage, but plainly related and equally unknown to anyone who saw it. Nahum took some blossoms to Arkham and shewed them to the editor of the Gazette, but that dignitary did not more than write a humorous article about them, in which the dark fears of the rustics were held up to polite ridicule. It was a mistake of Nahum to tell a stolid city man about the way the great overgrown morning cloak butterflies behaved in connection with these saxifrages. April brought a kind of madness to the country folk. Yeah, gazette is a fun word. It's like gazelle's a very pretty word, and then gazette is a fun word to say. Get some water. Moment. Right. April brought a kind of madness to the country folk, and began that disuse of the road past Nahum's which led to its ultimate abandonment. It was the vegetation. All the orchard trees blossomed forth in strange colors, and through the stony soil of the yard and adjacent pasturage there sprang up a bizarre growth which only a botanist could connect with the proper flora of the region. No sane, wholesome colors were seen anywhere to be seen, except in the green grass and leafage, but everywhere those hectic and prismatic variants of some diseased, underlying primary tone without a place among the known tints of earth. The Dutchman's breeches became a thing of sinister menace, and the bloodroots grew insolent in their chromatic perversion. Amy and the gardeners thought that most of the colors had a sort of haunting familiarity, and decided that they reminded one of the brittle globule in the meteor. Nahum plowed and sowed the 10-acre pasture and the upland lot, but did nothing with the land around the house. He knew it would be of no use, and hoped that the summer's strange growths would draw all the poison from the soil. He was prepared for the strange growths that would he was prepared for almost anything now, and had grown used to the sense of something near him, waiting to be heard. The shunning of his house by neighbors told on him, of course, but it told on his wife more. How long is the story? Pretty long. I'm trying to see how far it is. Oh my gosh, there's more pages. There's too many pages. I'll stop somewhere. Let's see. The boys were better off being at school each day, but they could not help being frightened by the gossip. Thaddeus, an especially sensitive youth, suffered the most. In May, the insects came, and Nahum's place became a nightmare of buzzing and crawling. Most of the creatures seemed not quite usual in their aspects and motions, and their nocturnal habits contradicted all former experience. The gardeners took to watching at night, watching in all directions at random for something. They could not tell what. It was then that they all owned that Thaddeus had been right about the trees. It was Miss Gardner was the next to see it from the windows as she watched the swollen boughs of a maple against a moonlit sky. The boughs surely moved, and there was no wind. It must be the sap. Strangeness had come into everything growing now, yet it was not of Nahum's family at all who made the next discovery. Familiarity had dulled them, and what they could not see was glimpsed by a timid windmill salesman from Bolton, who drove by one night in ignorance of the country legends. What he told in Arkham was given a short paragraph in the Gazette, and it was there that all the farmers, Nahum included, saw it first. The night had been dark, and the buggy lamps faint, but around A farm in the valley, which everyone knew from the account must be Nahum's. The darkness had been less thick. A dim, through distinct luminosity, seemed to inhere in all the vegetation, grass, leaves, and blossoms alike, while at one moment a detached piece of the phosphorescence appeared to stir furtively in the yard near the barn. The grass had so far seemed untouched, and the cows were freely pastured in the lot near the house, but toward the end of May the milk began to be bad. Then Nahum had the cows driven into the uplands, after which the trouble ceased. Not long after this change in grass and leaves became apparent to the eye. All the verdure was going gray, and was developing a highly singular quality of brittleness. Amy was now the only person who ever visited the place, and his visits were becoming fewer and fewer. When school closed, the gardeners were virtually cut off from the world, and sometimes let Amy do their errands in town. They were failing curiously, both physically and mentally, and no one was surprised when the news of Mrs. Gardner's madness stole around. It happened in June, about the anniversary of the meteor's fall, and the poor woman screamed about things in the air which she could not describe. In her raving, there was not a single specific noun, but only verbs and pronouns. Things moved and changed and fluttered, and ears tingled to impulses which were not wholly sounds. Something was taken away. She was being drained of something. Something was fastening itself on her that ought not to be. Something must make it keep off. Nothing was ever still in the night. The walls and windows shifted. Nahum did not send her to the country asylum, but let her wander about the house as long as she was harmless to herself and others. Even when her expression changed, he did nothing. But when the boys grew afraid of her, and Thaddeus nearly fainted at the way she made faces at him, he decided to keep her locked in the attic. By July, she had ceased to speak and crawled on all fours, and before that month was over, Nahum got the mad notion that she was slightly luminous in the dark. And, as he now clearly saw, was the case with nearby vegetation. It was a little before this that the horses had stampeded. Something had aroused them in the night, and their neighing and kicking in their stalls had been terrible. There seemed virtually nothing to do to calm them, and when Nahum opened the stable door, they all bolted out like frightened woodland deer. It took a week to track all four, and when found, they were seen to be quite useless and unmanageable. Something had snapped in their brains, and each one had to be shot for its own good. Oh, poor horses. Nahum borrowed a horse from Amy for his haying, but found it would not approach the barn. It shied, balked, and whinnied, and in the end he could not do nothing but drive it into the yard, while the men used their own strength to get the heavy wagon near the hayloft for convenient pitching. And all the while the vegetation was turning gray and brittle. Even the flowers, whose hue had been so strange, were graying now, and the fruit was coming out gray and dwarfed and tasteless. The asters and goldenrod bloomed gray and distorted, and the roses and zinnias and hollyhocks in the front yard were such blasphemous-looking things that Nahum's oldest boy, Zenas, cut them down. The strangely puffed insects died about that time, even the bees that had left their hives and taken to the woods. Okay, one more paragraph. By September, all the vegetation was fast crumbling to a grayish powder, and Nahum feared that the trees would die before the poison was out of the soil. His wife had now spells of terrific screaming, and he and the boys were in a constant state of nervous tension. They shunned people now, and when school opened, the boys did not go. But it was Amy, on one of his rare visits, who first realized that the well water was no longer good. It had an evil taste that was not exactly fetid, nor exactly salty, and Amy advised his friend to dig another well on higher ground to use it till the soil was good again. Nahum, however, ignored the warning, for he had by that time become callous to strange and unpleasant things. He and the boys continued to use the tainted supply, drinking it as listlessly and mechanically as they ate their meager and ill-cooked meals, as they did their thankless and monotonous chores the aimless days. There was something of stolid resignation about them all, as if they walked half in another world between lines of nameless guards to a certain and familiar doom. To be continued. Even the bees! The bees! Bees are like, nah, we're getting out of here. But yeah, I'm gonna take a little break. Whew. Because that's there's at least a half a story left, and I think I have a couple pages. So let me just take a breath. But I do remember this, parts of the story from the movie. The bees. Let me stretch out. Not that means teletrace, monkey. Welcome. Okay. But yeah, I'm waiting to I'm trying to remember what happens in the story, but I'm pretty sure. I think it was aliens? No, it's probably not aliens, right? Well, I guess it would depend on what you describe this as aliens. Whew. Let me drink some water, and then I'll continue. Okay. Let's continue. Thaddeus went mad in September after a visit to the well. He had gone with a pail and had come back empty-handed, shrieking and waving his arms, and sometimes lapsing into an inane titter or a whisper about the moving colors down there. 2 in 1 family was pretty bad, but Nahum was very brave about it. He let the boy run about for a week until he began stumbling and hurting himself, and then he shut him in an attic room across the hall from his mother's. That is a big attic, by the way. The way they screamed at each other from behind their locked doors was very terrible, especially to little Merwin, who fancied they talked in some terrible language that was not of this earth. Merwin was getting frightfully imaginative, and his restlessness was worse after the shutting away of the brother who had been his greatest playmate. Almost at the same time, the mortality among the livestock commenced. Poultry turned grayish and died very quickly, their meat being found dry and noisome upon cutting it. Hogs grew inordinately fat, then suddenly began to undergo loathsome changes which no one could explain. Their meat was of course useless, and Nahum was at his wit's end. No rural veterinary would approach his place, and the city veterinary from Arkham was openly baffled. The swine began growing gray and brittle and falling to pieces before they died, and their eyes and muzzles developed singular alterations. It was very inexplicable, for they had never been fed from the tainted vegetation. Then something struck the cows. Certain areas, or sometimes the whole body, would be uncannily shriveled or compressed, and the atrocious collapses or disintegrations were common. In the last stages, and death was always the result, there would be a graying and turning brittle like that which beset the hogs. There could be no question of poison, for all the causes occurred in a locked and undisturbed barn. No bites of prowling things could have brought that virus, for what live beast of earth can pass through solid obstacles? It must be only natural disease. Yet what disease could wreak such results was beyond any mind's guessing. When the harvest came, there was not an animal surviving on the place, for the stock and poultry were dead and the dogs had run away. These dogs, 3 in number, had all vanished one night and were never heard of again. The 5 cats had left some time before, but their going was scarcely noticed, since there now seemed to be no mice, and only Miss Gardner had made pets of the graceful felines. On the 19th of October, Nahum staggered into Amy's house with hideous news. That was yesterday, by the way. The death had come to poor Thaddeus in his attic room, and had come in a way which could not be told. Nahum had dug a grave in the railed family plot behind the farm, and had put therein what he had found. There could have been nothing from outside, for the small barred window and locked door were intact, but it was much as it had been in the barn. Amy and his wife consoled the stricken man as best they could, but shuddered as they did so. Stark terror seemed to cling around the gardeners and all they touched, and the very presence of one in the house was a breath from regions unnamed and unnameable. Amy accompanied Nahum home with the greatest reluctance, and did what he might to calm the hysterical sobbing of little Merwin. Zenas needed no calming. He had come of late to do nothing but stare into space, and obey what his father told him, and Amy thought that his fate was very merciful. Now and then Merwin's screams were answered faintly from the attic, and in response to an inquiring look, Nahum said that his wife was getting very feeble. When night approached, Amy managed to get away, for not even friendship could make him stay in that spot when the faint glow of the vegetation begun, and the trees may or may not have swayed without wind. It was really lucky for Amy that he was not more imaginative. Even as things were, his mind was bent ever so slightly. But had he been able to connect and reflect upon all the portents around him, he must inevitably have turned a total maniac. In the twilight he hastened home, the screams of the mad woman and the nervous child ringing horribly in his ears. 3 days later, Nahum lurched into Amy's kitchen in the early morning, and in the absence of his host stammered out a desperate tale once more, while Miss Pierce listened in a clutching fright. It was little Merwin this time. He was gone. He had gone out late at night with a lantern and pail for water, and had never come back. He'd been going to pieces for days, and hardly knew what he was about. Screamed at everything. There had been a frantic shriek from the yard then, but before the father could get to the door, the boy was gone. There was no glow from the lantern he had taken, and of the child himself, no trace. At the time, Nahum thought the lantern and pail were gone too, but when dawn came, and the man had plodded back from his all-night search of the woods and fields, he had found some very curious things near the well. There was a crushed and apparently somewhat melted mass of iron, which had certainly been the lantern, while a bent bale and twisted iron hoops beside it, both half-used, seemed to hint at the remnants of the pail. That was all. Nahum was past imagining. Miss Pierce was blank, and Amy, when he had reached home and heard the tale, could give no guess. Merwin was gone, and there would be no use in telling the people around, who shunned all the gardeners now. No use either in telling the city people at Arkham, who laughed at everything. Thad was gone, and now Murney was gone. Something was creeping and waiting to be seen and felt and heard. Nahum would soon go, and he wanted Amy to look after his wife and Zenas if they survived him. It must all be a judgment of some sort, though he could not fancy what for, since he had always walked uprightly in the Lord's ways, so far as he knew. For over 2 weeks Amy saw nothing of Nahum, and then, worried about what might have happened, he overcame his fears and paid the gardener place a visit. There was no smoke from the great chimney, and for a moment the visitor was apprehensive of the worst. The aspect of the whole farm was shocking. Grayish, withered grass and leaves on the ground, vines falling in brittle wreckage from the archaic walls and gables, and the great bare trees clawing up at the gray November sky with a studied malevolence which Amy could not but feel had come from some subtle change in the tilt of the branches. But Nahum was alive, after all. He was weak, and lying on a couch in the low-ceiled ceiling, but perfectly conscious and able to give simple orders to Zenas. The room was deadly cold, and as Amy visibly shivered, the host shouted huskily to Zenas for more wood. Wood indeed was sorely needed, since the caverner's fireplace was unlit and empty, with a cloud of soot blowing about in the chill wind that came down the chimney. Presently, Nahum asked him if the extra wood had made him any more comfortable, and then Amy saw what happened. The status cord had broken at last, and the hapless farmer's mind was proof against more sorrow. Questioning tactfully, Amy could get no clear data at all about the missing Zenus. In the well. He lives in the well, was all that the clouded father would say. Then there was a flash. Then there flashed across the visitor's mind a sudden thought of the mad wife, and he changed his line of inquiry. Nabby, why, here she is, was the surprised response of poor Nahum, and Amy saw that he must search for himself. Leaving the harmless babbler on the couch, he took the keys from their nail beside the door and climbed the creaking stairs to the attic. It was very close and noisome up there, and no sound could be heard from any direction. Of the 4 doors in sight, only one was locked, and on this he tried various keys on the ring he had taken. The third key proved to be the right one, and after some fumbling, Amy threw open the low, white door. It was quite dark inside, for the window was small and half obscured by the crude wooden bars, and Amy could see nothing at all on the wide planked floor. The stench was beyond enduring, and before proceeding further, he had to retreat to another room and return with his lungs filled with breathable air. When he did enter, he saw something dark in the corner, and upon seeing it more clearly, he screamed outright. While he screamed, he thought a momentary cloud eclipsed the window, and a second later he felt himself brushed as if by some hateful current of vapor. Strange colors danced before his eyes, and had not a real present horror numbed him, he would have thought of the globule in the meteor that the geologist hammered had shattered, and of the mortar of vegetation that had sprouted in the spring. As it was he thought only of the blasphemous monstrosity which confronted him, and which all too clearly had shared the nameless fate of young Thaddeus and the livestock. But the terrible thing about this horror was that it very slowly and perceptibly moved as it continued to crumble. Amy would give me no added particulars to this scene, but the shape in the corner does not reappear in his tale as a moving object. There are things which cannot be mentioned, and what is done in common humanity is sometimes cruelly judged by the law. I gathered that no moving thing was left in that attic room, and that to leave anything capable of motion there would have been a deed so monstrous as to damn any accountable being to eternal torment. Any one but a stolid farmer would have fainted or gone mad, but Amy walked conscious through that low doorway and locked that accursed secret behind him. There would be Nahum to deal with now. He must be fed and tended, and removed to some place where he could be cared for. Commencing his descent of the dark stairs, Amy heard a thud below him. He even thought a scream had been suddenly choked off, and recalled nervously the clammy vapor which had brushed by him in that frightful room above. What presence had his cry and entry started up? Halted by some vague fear, he heard still further sounds below. Indubitably, there was a sort of heavy dragging, and a most detestably sticky noise, as of some fiendish and unclean species of suction. With an associative sense goaded to feverish heights, he thought unaccountably of what he had seen upstairs. Good God! What eldritch dream world was this into which he had blundered? He dared to move neither backward nor forward, but stood there trembling at the black curve of the boxed-in staircase. Every trifle of the scene burned itself into his brain. The sound, the sense of dread expectancy, the darkness, the steepness of the narrow steps, and merciful heaven, the faint but unmistakable luminosity of all the woodwork in sight, steps, sides, exposed laths, and beams alike. I guess so. I think Arkham is a place actually somewhere in the northeast. What is it called? Like the northeastern states. I forget. I think it's like, it might be New York or it might be Massachusetts. But yeah, it's actually, I think it's a real place. Then there burst forth a frantic whinny from Amy's horse outside, followed at once by a clatter which told of a frenzied runaway. In another moment, horse and buggy had gone beyond earshot, leaving the frightened man on the dark stairs to guess what had sent them. But that was not all. There had been another sound out there. A sort of liquid splash. Water. It must have been the well. He had left Hero untied near it, and a buggy wheel must have brushed the coping and knocked in a stone. And still the pale phosphorence glowed in that detestably ancient woodwork. God, how old the house was! Most of it built before 1670, and the gambrel roof not later than 1730. A feeble scratching on the floor downstairs now sounded distinctly, and Amy's grip tightened on a heavy stick he had picked up in the attic for some purpose. Slowly nerving himself, he finished his descent and walked boldly towards the kitchen. But he did not complete the walk, because what he sought was no longer there. It had come to meet him, and it was still alive after a fashion. Whether it had crawled, or whether it had been dragged by any external force, Amy could not say, but the death had been at it. Everything had happened in the last half hour, but collapse, graying, and disintegration were already far advanced. There was a horrible brittleness, and dry fragments were scaling off. Amy couldn't touch it, but looked horrifiedly into the distorted parody that had been effaced. What was it? Nahum, what was it? He whispered, and the cleft, bulging lips were able to crackle out a final answer. Nothing. The color, it burns. Cold and wet, but it burns. It lives in the well. I seen it. A kind of smoke, just like the flowers last spring. The well shone at night. Thad, Murney, and Zenas, everything alive, sucking the life out of everything in that stone. It must have come in that stone. Pissened the whole place. Don't know what it wants. That round thing the men from the college dug out of that stone. They smashed it. It was that same color. Just the same. Like the flowers and plants. Must have been more of them. Seeds. They growed. I seen it the first time this week. Must have got strong on Zenas. He was a big boy, full of life. It beats down your mind and then gets you, burns you up. In the well water. He was right about that. Evil water. Zenas never come back from the well. Can't get away. Draws you. You know, summit's coming, but 'tain't no use. I seen it time and again since Xanthus was took. Where's Nabby? My head's not good. Don't know how long since I fed her. It'll get her if we ain't careful. Just a color. Her face is getting to have that color sometimes towards night, and it burns and sucks. It come from someplace where things ain't as they is here. One of them professors said so. He was right. Look out, Amy. It'll do something more. Sucks the life out. But that was all. That which spoke could speak no more because it had completely caved in. Amy laid a red-checked tablecloth over what was left and reeled out the back door into the fields. He climbed the slope to the 10-acre pasture and stumbled home by the north and the woods. He could not pass that well from which his horse had run away. He had looked at it through the window and had seen no stone was missing from the rim. Then the lurching buggy had not dislodged anything after all. The splash had been something else. Something which went into the well after it had done with poor Nahum. When Amy reached his house, the horse and buggy had arrived before him and thrown his wife into fits of anxiety. Reassuring her without explanations, he set out at once for Arkham and notified the authorities that the Gardner family was no more. He indulged in no details, but merely told of the deaths of Nahum and Nabby. That of Thaddeus already being known, and mentioned that the cause seemed to be that of the same strange ailment which had killed the livestock. He also stated that Merwin and Zenas had disappeared. There was considerable questioning at the police station, and in the end Amy was compelled to take 3 officers to the Gardner farm, together with the coroner, the medical examiner, and the veterinary who had treated the diseased animals. He went much against his will, for the afternoon was advancing, and he feared the fall of night over that accursed place. But it was some comfort to have so many people with him. The 6 men drove out in a Democrat wagon, following Amy's buggy, and arrived at the pest-ridden farmhouse about 4 o'clock. Used as the officers were to gruesome experiences, not one remained unmoved at what was found in the attic and under the red checked tablecloth on the floor below. No problem. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Lou, for coming by. You have a good rest, okay? And good luck with your future crush stuff. Okay? Sleep well. Hopefully. Wait, I gained a sub? Cool! Thank you for subbing! For whoever sub, hello there. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Make yourself known if you want to. But yes, thank you, thank you. Alright. Yay, there you are, Crazy Monkey. What's up? Thank you, thank you. Alright, let's go. The whole aspect of the farm with its grey desolation was terrible enough, but those 2 crumbling objects were beyond all bounds. No one could look long at them, and even the medical examiner admitted that there was very little to examine. Specimens could be analyzed, of course, so he busied himself in obtaining them. And here it develops that a very puzzling aftermath occurred at the college laboratory where the 2 files of dust were finally taken. Under the spectroscope, both samples gave off an unknown spectrum, in which many of the baffling bands were precisely like those in which the strange meteor had yielded in the previous year. The property of emitting this spectrum vanished in a month, the dust thereafter consisting mainly of alkaline phosphates and carbonates. Amy would not have told the men about the well if he thought they meant to do anything then and there. It was getting towards sunset, and he was anxious to be away, but he could not help glancing nervously at the stony curb by the great sweep, and when a detective questioned him, he admitted that Nahum had feared something down there. So much so that he never even thought about searching it for Merwin or Zenas. After that, nothing would do but that they empty and explore the well immediately, so Amy had to wait trembling while pail after pail of rank water was hauled up and splashed on the soaking ground outside. The men sniffed in disgust at the fluid, and toward the last held their noses against the fodder they were uncovering. It was not long a job, as they had feared it would be, since the water was phenomenally low. There is no need to speak too exactly of what they found. Merwin and Zenas were both there, in part, though the vestiges were mainly skeletal. There were also a small deer and a large dog in about the same state, and a number of bones of smaller animals. The ooze and slime at the bottom seemed inexplicably porous and bubbling, and a man who had descended on handholds with a long pole found that he could sink the wooden shaft to any depth in the mud of the floor without meeting any solid obstruction. Oh, yay, there you go. Hey, thank you, thank you. Good job, Stream Elements. You're actually working. Okay, let's see. Twilight had now fallen, and the lanterns were brought from the house. Then it was seen that nothing further could be gained from the well. Everyone went indoors and conferred in the ancient sitting room while the intermittent light of a spectral half-moon played wanly on the grey desolation outside. The men were frankly nonplussed by the entire case, and could find no convincing common element to link the strange vegetable conditions, the unknown disease of livestock and humans, and the unaccountable deaths of Merwin and Zenas in the tainted well. They had heard the common country talk, it is true, but could not believe that anything contrary to natural law had occurred. No doubt the meteor had poisoned the soil, but the illness of persons and animals who had eaten nothing grown in that soil was another matter. Was it the well water? Very possibly. It might be a good idea to analyze it. But what peculiar madness could have made both boys jump into the well? Their deeds were so similar, and the fragments showed that they had both suffered from the gray, brittle death. Why was everything so gray and brittle? It was the coroner, seated near a window overlooking the yard, who first noticed the glow about the well. Night had fully set in, and all the abhorrent ground seemed faintly luminous with more than fitful moonbeams. But this new glow was something definite and distinct, and appeared to shoot up from the black pit like a softened ray from a searchlight, giving dull reflections in the little ground pools where the water had been emptied. It had a very queer color, and as all the men clustered round the window, Amy gave a violent start. For this strange beam of ghastly miasma was to him of no unfamiliar hue. He had seen that color before, and feared to think what it might mean. He had seen it in the nasty brittle globule that the aerolite 2 summers ago had seen in the crazy vegetation of the springtime, and had thought he had seen for an instant that very morning against the small bared window of that terrible attic room where nameless things had happened. It had flashed there a second, and a clammy and hateful current of vapor had brushed past him, and then poor Nahum had been taken by something of that color. He had said so at the last, said it was like the globule on the plants. After that had come the runaway in the yard, and the splash in the well, and now that well was belching forth to the night a pale, insidious beam of the same demonic tint. It does credit to the alertness of Amy's mind that he puzzled even at that tense moment over a point which was essentially scientific. He could not but wonder at his gleaning of the same impression from a vapor glimpsed in the daytime against a window opening on the morning sky, and from a nocturnal exhalation seen as a phosphorescent mist against the black and blasted landscape. It wasn't right. It was against nature, and he thought of those terrible last words of his stricken friend. It comes from some place where things ain't as they is here. One of them professor said so. All 3 horses outside, tied to a pair of shriveled saplings by the road, were now neighing and pawing frantically. The wagon driver started for the door to do something, but Amy laid a shaky hand on his shoulder. "Don't go out there," he whispered. "There's more to this now what we know. Nahum said something lived in the well that sucked your life out. He said it must be some that growed from a round ball like one we all seen in the meteor stone that fell a year ago in June. Sucks and burns, he said, and is just a cloud of color like that light out there now, that ye can hardly see and can't tell what it is. Nahum thought it feeds on everything living and gets stronger all the time. He said he's seen it this last week. It must be something from far away off in the sky, like the men from the college last year says the meteor stone was. The way it's made and the way it works ain't like no way in God's world. It's summit from beyond." So the men paused indecisively as the light from the well grew stronger, and the hitched horses pawed and whinnied in increasing frenzy. It was truly an awful moment, with terror in that ancient and accursed house itself. 4 monstrous sets of fragments, 2 from the outside and 2 from the well in the woodshed behind, and that shaft of unknown and unholy iridescence from the slimy depths in front. Amy had restrained the driver on impulse, forgetting how uninjured he himself was after the clammy brushing of that colored vapor in the attic room. But perhaps it was just as well that he acted as he did. No one will ever know what was abroad that night. And though the blasphemy from beyond has not so far hurt any human of unweakened mind, there is no telling what it might not have done at that last moment. And with its seemingly increased strength and the special signs of purpose it was soon to display beneath the half-clouded moonlit sky. All at once, one of the detectives at the window gave a short, sharp gasp. The others looked at him, and then quickly followed his own gaze upward to the point at which its idle straying had been suddenly arrested. There was no need for words. What had been disputed in country gossip was disputable no longer, and it is because of the thing which every man of that party agreed in whispering later on that the strange days are never talked about in Arkham. It is necessary to premise that there was no wind at that hour of the evening. One did arise not long after, but there was absolutely none then. Even the dry tips of the lingering hedge mustard, gray and blighted, and the fringe on the roof on the standing Democrat wagon were unstirred. And yet, amid that tense, godless calm, the high bare boughs of all the trees in the yard were moving. They were twitching morbidly and spasmodically, clawing in convulsive and epileptic madness at the moonlit clouds, scratching impotently in the noxious air as if jerked by something alien and bodiless line of linkage with subterranean horrors writhing and struggling below the black roots. Not a man breathed for several seconds. Then, a cloud of darker death passed over the moon, and the silhouette of clutching branches faded out momentarily. At this, there was a general cry, muffled with awe, but husky and almost identical from every throat, for the terror had not faded with the silhouette, and in an fearsome instant of deeper darkness, the watchers saw wriggling at that treetop's height 1,000 tiny points of faint, unhallowed radiance, tipping each bow like the fire of St. Elmo or the flames that came down on the apostle's head at Pentecost. It was a monstrous constellation of unnatural light, like a glutted swarm of corpse-fed fireflies dancing hellish sarabands over an accursed marsh. And its color was that same nameless intrusion which Amy had come to recognize and dread. All the while, the shaft of phosphorescence from the well was getting brighter and brighter, bringing to the minds of the huddled men a sense of doom and abnormality which far outtraced any image in their conscious minds could form. It was no longer shining out, it was pouring out, and as the shapeless stream of unplaceable color left the well, it seemed to flow directly into the sky. The veterinary shivered and walked to the front door to drop the heavy extra bar across it. Amy shook no less and had to tug and point for lack of controllable voice when he wished to draw notice to the growing luminosity of the trees. The neighing and stamping of the horses had become utterly frightful, but not a soul of that group in the old house would have ventured forth for any earthly reward. With the moments, the shining of the trees increased, while their restless branches seemed to strain more and more toward verticality. The wood of the well sweep was shining now, and presently a policeman dumbly pointed to some wooden sheds and beehives near the stone wall on the west. They were commencing to shine too, though the tethered vehicles of the visitors seemed so far unaffected. Then there was a wild commotion and clopping in the road, and as Amy quenched the lamp for better seeing, they realized that the span of frantic grays had broke their sapling and run off with their Democrat wagon. The shock served to loosen several tongues, and embarrassed whispers were exchanged. It spreads on everything organic that's been around here," muttered the medical examiner. No one replied, but the man who had been in the well gave a hint that his long pole must have stirred up something intangible. It was awful, he added. There was no bottom at all, just ooze and bubbles and the feeling of something lurking under there. Amy's horse still pawed and screamed deafeningly in the road outside and nearly drowned its owner's faint quaver as he mumbled his formless reflections. It come from that stone. It growled down there. It's got everything living. It fed itself on them. Mind and body. Thad and Murney, Cenas and Nabby. Nahum was the last. They all drunk the water. It got strong on them. It come from beyond. Where things ain't like they be here. Now it's going home. At this point, as the column of unknown color flared suddenly stronger and began to weave itself into fantastic suggestions of shape, which each spectator later described differently, there came from a poor tethered hero such a sound as no man before or since ever heard from a horse. Every person in that low-pitched sitting room stopped his ears, and Amy turned away from the window in horror and nausea. Words could not convey it. When Amy looked out again, the hapless beast lay huddled inert on the moonlit ground between the splintered shafts of the buggy. That was the last of Hero till they buried him the next day. But the present was no time to mourn, for almost at this instant a detective silently called attention to something terrible in the very room with them. In the absence of the lamplight, it was clear that a faint phosphorescence had begun to pervade the entire apartment. It glowed on the broad planked floor and the fragment of rag carpet, and shimmered over the sashes of the small paned windows. It ran up and down the exposed corner posts, coruscated about the shelf and mantel, and infected the very doors and furniture. Each minute saw it strengthen, and at last it was very plain that healthy living things must leave that house. Amy showed them the back door and the path up through the fields to the 10-acre pasture. They walked and stumbled as in a dream, and did not dare look back till they were far away on the high ground. They were glad of the path, for they could not have gone the front way by that well. It was bad enough passing the glowing barn and sheds, and those shining orchard trees with the gnarled, fiendish contours. But thank heaven the branches did their worst twisting high up. The moon went under some very black clouds as they crossed the rustic bridge over Chapman's Brook, and it was blind groping from there to the open meadows. When they looked back toward the valley and the distant Gardner place at the bottom, they saw a fearsome sight. All the farm was shining with the hideous unknown blend of color. Tree, buildings, and even such grass and herbage as had not been wholly changed to lethal gray brittleness. The boughs were all straining skyward, tipped with tongues of foul flame, and lambent tricklings of the same monstrous fire were creeping about the ridgepoles of the house, barns, and sheds. It was a scene from a vision of Fuseli, and over all the rest reigned that riot of luminous amorphousness, that alien, undimensioned rainbow of cryptic poison from the well, seething, feeling, lapping, reaching, scintillating, straining, and malignly bubbling in its cosmic and unrecognizable chromaticism. Then, without warning, the hideous thing shot vertically up toward the sky, like a rocket or meteor, leaving behind no trail and disappearing through a round and curiously regular hole in the clouds before any man could gasp or cry out. No watcher can ever forget that night, and Amy stared blankly at the stars of Cygnus, Deneb twinkling above the others, where the unknown color had melted into the Milky Way. But his gaze was the next moment called swiftly to earth by the crackling in the valley. It was just that, only a wooden ripping and crackling, and not an explosion, as so many others of the party vowed. Yet the outcome was the same, for in one feverish, kaleidoscopic instant, there burst up from that doomed and accursed farm a gleamingly eruptive cataclysm of unnatural sparks and substance, blurring the glance of the few who saw it, and sending forth to the zenith a bombarding cloudburst of such colored and fantastic fragments as our universe must needs disown. Through quickly reclosing vapors, they followed the great morbidity that had vanished, and in another second they had vanished too. Behind and below, only a darkness to which the men dared not return. And all about was a mounting wind which seemed to sweep down in black, frore gusts from interstellar space. It shrieked and howled and lashed the fields and distorted woods in a mad cosmic frenzy, till soon the trembling party realized it would be no use waiting for the moon to show what was left down there at Nahum's. Too awed even to hint theories, the 7 shaking men trudged back toward Arkham by the North Road. Amy was worse than his fellows, and begged them to see him inside his own kitchen, instead of keeping straight on to town. He did not wish to cross the nighted, wind-whipped woods alone to his home on the main road, for he had an added shock that the others were spared, and was crushed forever with a brooding fear he dared not even mention for many years to come. As the rest of the watchers on that tempestuous hill had stolidly set their faces toward the road, Amy had looked back an instant at the shadowed valley of desolation so lately sheltering his ill-starred friend, and from that stricken, faraway spot he had seen something feebly rise, only to sink down again upon the place from which the great shapeless horror had shot into the sky. It was just a color, but not any color of our earth or heavens. And because Amy recognized that color, and knew that this last faint remnant must still lurk down there in the well, he has never been quite right since. Amy would never go near the place again. It is over half a century now since the horror happened, but he has never been there, and will be glad when the new reservoir blots it out. I shall be glad too, for I do not like the way the sunlight changed color around the mouth of that abandoned well I passed. I hope the water will always be very deep, but even so, I shall never drink it. I do not think I shall visit the Arkham country hereafter. 3 of the men who had been with Amy returned the next morning to see the ruins by daylight, but there were not any real ruins, only the bricks of the chimney, the stones of the cellar, some mineral and metallic litter here and there, and the rim of that nefandous well. Save for Amy's dead horse, which they towed away and buried, and the buggy which they shortly returned to him, everything that had ever been living had gone. 5 eldritch acres of dusty gray desert remained, nor has anything ever grown there since. To this day it sprawls open to the sky, like a great spot eaten by acid in the woods and fields, and the few who have ever dared glimpse it, in spite of the rural tales, have named it the Blasted Heath. The rural tales are queer. They might be even queerer if city men and college chemists could be interested enough to analyze the water from that disused well, or the gray dust that no wind seems ever to disperse. Botanists, too, ought to study the stunted flora on the borders of that spot, for they might shed a light on the country notion that the blight is spreading, little by little, perhaps an inch a year. People say the color of the neighboring herbage is not quite right in the spring, and that wild things leave queer prints in the light winter snow. Snow never seems to be quite so heavy on the Blasted Heath as it is elsewhere. Horses, the few that are left in this motor age, grow skittish in the Silent Valley, and hunters cannot depend on their dogs too near the splotch of grayish dust. They say the mental influences are very bad too. Numbers went queer in the years after Nahum's taking, and always they lacked the power to get away. The stronger-minded folk all left the region, and only foreigners tried to live in the crumbling old homesteads. They could not stay, though, and one sometimes wonders what insight beyond ours their wild, weird stories of whispered magic have given them. Their dreams at night, they protest, are very horrible in that grotesque country, and surely the very look of the dark realm is enough to stir a morbid fancy. No traveler has escaped a sense of strangeness in those deep ravines, and artists shiver as they paint thick woods whose mystery is as much of the spirit as of the eye. I myself am curious about the sensation I derived from my one lone walk before Amy told me his tale. When twilight came, I had vaguely wished some clouds would gather, for an odd timidity about the deep-skied voids above had crept into my soul. Do not ask me for my opinion. I do not know. That is all. There was no one but Amy to question, for Arkham people will not talk about the strange days, and all 3 professors who saw the aerolite and its colored globule are dead. There were other globules, depend upon that. One must have fed itself and escaped, and probably there was another which was too late. No doubt it is still down the well. I know there was something wrong with the sunlight I saw above the miasmal brink. The rustics say the blight creeps an inch a year, so perhaps there is a kind of growth or nourishment even now. But whatever demon hatchling is there, it must be tethered to something, or else it would quickly spread. Is it fastened to the roots of those trees that clawed the air? One of the current Arkham tales is about fat oaks that shine and move as they ought not to do at night. What it is, only God knows. In terms of matter, I suppose the thing Amy described would be called a gas, but this gas obeyed laws that are not of our cosmos. There was no fruit of such worlds and suns as shine on the telescopes and photographic plates of our observatories. There was no breath from the skies whose motions and dimensions our astronomers measure or deem too vast to measure. It was just a color out of space, a frightful messenger from unformed realms of infinity beyond all nature as we know it, from realms whose mere existence stuns the brain and numbs us with the black extra-cosmic gulfs it throws open before our frenzied eyes. I doubt very much if Amy consciously lied to me, and I do not think his tale was all a freak of madness as the townsfolk had forewarned. Something terrible came to the hills and valleys on that meteor, and something terrible, though I know not in what proportion, still remains. I shall be glad to see the water come. Meanwhile, I hope nothing will happen to Amy. He saw so much of the thing, and its influence was so insidious. Why has he never been able to move away? How clearly he recalled those dying words of Nahum's. Can't get away. Draws you know summit's comin', but it ain't no use. Amy is such a good old man. When the reservoir gang gets to work, I must write the chief engineer to keep a sharp watch on him. I would hate to think of him as the gray, twisted, brittle monstrosity which persists more and more in my troubling sleep. The end. And that was The Color Out of Space by HP Lovecraft. I hope you all enjoyed that. Honestly, this is much sadder than the movie. The movie is very good at horror, actually. But I would suggest watching it if you can. I don't know where you can watch it, but I have it on DVD, so I'm going to watch it on Sunday. I'm probably going to put it up on my Discord, so if you'd like to join my Discord and watch the movie, it's happening Sunday. And yeah, I'm glad you liked it, Crazed Monkey. Thanks for watching. I'm glad you're here. I usually don't do this, so this is like my Halloween thing for tonight. And I guess for the rest of the week. But yeah, I hope you all had fun. But yeah, tomorrow I will be doing a Final Fantasy XIV stream. If you would like to catch that, I'm doing that tomorrow. And like I said, Sunday I will see how this external CD drive works, and I can probably play my DVD. But yeah, thank you for coming, everybody. Y'all have a good night. If you haven't subbed yet, please sub. If you like the content, like the video, and also ring that bell so you can be alerted to when I stream next time. But yeah, thank you very much. And this is Autumn Rain, signing off. Have a good night, guys.